I could still feel the coolness of the polished wooden table in the meeting room that morning, where Colin Hayes, the new vice president of sales at Vantage Financial, slid a stack of termination papers toward me. "We need hungrier talent who can meet higher targets," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "The company is moving in a new direction." That was how he ended my 9 years of dedication. I, Nathan Carter, 46 years old, senior account executive, who had brought in 40% of Vantage's revenue. I looked straight into Colin's eyes, searching for a hint of sincerity, but his gaze held only the coldness of someone completing a task. I gave a faint smile, said, "Thank you for the opportunity," and stood up. No arguments, no resistance. I knew any sign of weakness now would only satisfy Colin more, but in my mind I was already thinking about tomorrow, and I knew it would be interesting. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest video. The meeting room was on a high floor of Vantage Financial's headquarters, right in the heart of Charlotte, North Carolina. Through the large glass window, I caught a glimpse of the city skyline, skyscrapers glinting under the early morning sun, where I had spent nearly a decade building a client portfolio worth millions of dollars. I stepped out of the room, my shoes echoing on the wooden floor. The air was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioner and a few averted glances from nearby colleagues. I didn't blame them. Everyone has bills to pay, families to care for, but I noticed Tom Delaney, my close friend and colleague, wasn't there. That morning, he had tried to call me, probably to warn me about this meeting, but I was too busy preparing a report to pick up. I walked to my workspace, a secluded corner near a cracked window I'd been moved to after an office renovation a few months ago. The desk now looked empty, with only a few personal items left. I began packing, one by one, into a cardboard box. A family photo taken at a park near our house, when Sophie was little and Liam was learning to walk. A coffee mug Sophie had painted for me in elementary school, with the scrawled words, "Dad's hash one." A set of personal client contacts, something I always kept separate, not stored on the company's system. Not out of suspicion, just a habit from over 20 years in the business. Sarah Bennett, the accountant, with a warm smile, passed by and stopped. "Need help with that?" she asked, her eyes showing confusion as she saw the cardboard box. "Are you changing offices?" I shrugged, replying, "Something like that." I didn't want to make a scene, didn't want anyone's pity. Sarah nodded, but I saw her hesitate, as if she wanted to ask more. She was a good person, always checking on Laura, and remembering to send Liam birthday cards. But I didn't need comfort right now. I just wanted to leave, taking what was mine. I hugged the box and stepped into the elevator. As the doors opened, I saw Richard Langston, Vantage's CEO, standing there. He wore a gray suit, eyes glued to his phone, fingers swiping quickly across the screen. I nodded in greeting, but he only returned a vague nod, not really seeing me. Richard was the one who hired me 9 years ago, when Vantage was still Southern Capital Group, a small company with big dreams. He had said, "Nathan, I need someone who knows this market, someone clients trust." Now he didn't know Colin had just fired the person bringing in $14 million in revenue each year, but I knew he'd find out soon, when the next quarter's numbers weren't the same. The elevator reached the main lobby, where natural light flooded through large glass panels, reflecting off the marble floor. I stepped out, hugging the box, feeling the weight of 9 years, not just objects but long days, late flights, handshakes with clients who became friends. I walked to the parking lot, not looking back. When I placed the box on the back seat, I saw the family photo on top, Laura smiling, Sophie in her high school graduation cap, Liam holding a basketball. I closed the car door, got into the driver's seat, and didn't turn on the radio. I wanted silence, to hear the thoughts taking shape, as if waking from a long dream, realizing the house I'd built was never truly mine. Driving through the bustling streets of Charlotte, I didn't feel anger, not because I was noble, but because I'd seen this coming. 6 months ago, when Colin arrived, I knew he didn't like me. The expensive tailored suits, the cliched talk of innovation and hunting, the way he avoided joining client calls, all signs. 3 weeks after he started, he cut my commission by 20%, despite my consistent overachievement. He moved my desk to a corner, removed my name from meeting invites, and yesterday, I saw someone checking my computer during lunch. Small things, not worth making a fuss over, but enough to know a storm was brewing. I pulled up to my house, a 2-story home in the Charlotte suburbs, where Laura and I had built our life. The house was empty today. Laura was visiting her sister in Raleigh. Sophie was busy with law school, and Liam was probably at basketball practice. I carried the box into the kitchen, set it on the counter. My phone buzzed. A message from Evan Marshall, my biggest client, about a dinner to discuss a contract renewal next week. He didn't know yet. No one did. I set the phone down, looked out the window. The oak tree in the yard stood tall, where Liam once fell off his bike, where Sophie used to read books in the shade. 9 years of building relationships, all based on my word and reliability. Colin didn't just fire an employee. He severed the thread tying Vantage to millions in revenue, and he had no idea. I took the family photo from the box. Laura, Sophie, Liam, they were why I worked so hard, but also the ones I'd missed too much. I'd promised them a better future, and I would keep that promise. Not by seeking revenge, but by doing what I do best, building trust. I placed the photo on the shelf, tucked the box in a corner, and headed upstairs. Tomorrow I would start, not with anger, but with clarity. Colin had made a big mistake, and I only needed to step aside to let it unfold. I sat in the car, the streetlights of Charlotte casting faint streaks across the windshield. The cardboard box holding 9 years of dedication lay quietly in the back seat, a reminder of what I'd just lost, or rather what Vantage Financial had thrown away. I didn't turn on the radio, didn't call anyone. I wanted silence to think, to piece together the fragments that had quietly emerged over the past 6 months. Colin Hayes didn't fire me on a whim. It started when he walked into Vantage. And now, driving home, I realized how clear the signs had been. 6 months ago, Colin Hayes appeared at Vantage Financial's headquarters, like a sudden gust of wind. He wore tailored suits, spouted cliches about innovation and hunting, and quickly became the center of meetings. I, Nathan Carter, 46, senior account executive, had been there 9 years, bringing in 40% of the revenue, about $14 million annually. But Colin never once joined me on a client call. He preferred his corner office with a view of Charlotte's skyline, crafting plans he called vision. I didn't mind at first. I was used to new bosses coming in, eager to make their mark. But then things started to change. Just 3 weeks after Colin arrived, he announced a new commission structure. My income dropped 20%, despite always exceeding targets. "We need to focus on new clients, Nathan," he said in a meeting, his eyes skimming over me like I was an outdated tool. I explained that I'd doubled the Marshall Industries contract, one of our biggest clients, but he just shrugged. "That's the past. The future is hunting, not farming." I didn't argue. I knew my numbers spoke for themselves, but I started noticing the small things. A month later, Vantage's office was renovated, and my desk was moved to a dim corner near a cracked window, where the light was weak, and the air conditioner hummed incessantly. "We need space for new staff," Colin explained, but I noticed others kept their spots. My name began disappearing from meeting invites. Strategy sessions I used to lead now featured only Colin and the new faces he brought in. I kept working as always, calling Evan Marshall, Patrick Sullivan, David Ramsey, ensuring contracts were renewed. But the sense of isolation grew stronger. Then yesterday, when I returned from lunch, I found my computer being checked. An unfamiliar technician sat there, flustered when he saw me. "Just routine maintenance," he said. But I knew no maintenance was scheduled. I didn't make a scene. I nodded, sat down, and went back to work. But in my mind, I took note. The small things, corner desk, missing invites, computer checks, weren't worth fighting over. But they were pieces of a larger plan. And this morning, when Colin slid those termination papers across the table, I knew I'd been right. I drove through Charlotte's familiar streets, neon lights from restaurants and bars flashing by. I didn't feel angry, just a strange clarity, like waking from a long dream, and realizing the house I'd built was never truly mine. Vantage Financial had changed, no longer the Southern Capital Group I joined 9 years ago, where Richard Langston shook my hand and said, "Nathan, you're the one we need." Now Richard was busy with bigger plans, and Colin was his pawn, or someone else's. I pulled up to my house, a 2-story home in the Charlotte suburbs, where Laura and I raised Sophie and Liam. The house was empty today. Laura was in Raleigh, with her sister Sophie was at law school, and Liam was probably at basketball practice. I carried the cardboard box into the kitchen, set it on the counter, and checked my phone. Evan Marshall's message was still there, about a dinner to discuss a contract renewal next week. "Booked a spot for Thursday night," he wrote. "See you then." I set the phone down, didn't reply.
Evan didn't know yet. No one did. But I knew. 9 years of building relationships with him, with Patrick, with David, all based on my word and reliability. Colin didn't just fire an employee. He cut the thread tying Vantage to millions in revenue, and he had no idea. I stood in the kitchen, looking out the window. The oak tree in the yard stood tall, where Liam once fell off his bike, where Sophie used to read books in the shade. I took the family photo from the box. Laura smiled. Sophie wore her high school graduation cap. Liam held a basketball. I'd promised them a better future, but I'd also missed too much. Birthdays, games, evenings, just listening to their stories. I placed the photo on the shelf, feeling a new clarity. Not anger, not revenge, but a plan. I wouldn't rush anything. Tomorrow, I'd do what needed to be done, with the calm and precision that built a $14 million client portfolio. I tucked the box in a corner, headed upstairs to the bedroom. The house was quiet, but not lonely. I knew Laura would support me, Sophie would be proud, and Liam would need me at his next game. Colin had made a big mistake, and I didn't need to do anything but step aside to let it unfold. I lay down, closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I felt relieved, as if one door had closed, and another was waiting for me to open. I stood in the kitchen, the soft yellow light, casting a glow on the family photo on the shelf. Laura, Sophie, Liam, they were why I'd poured 9 years into Vantage Financial, but also the ones I'd unwittingly left behind too often. The phone sat silent on the counter. Evan Marshall's message about a contract renewal dinner, a reminder that the relationships I'd built didn't belong to Vantage, they belonged to me.
Colin Hayes may have fired me, but he couldn't erase what I had built. Looking out at the oak tree in the yard, I thought about the 9-year journey, from the early days at Vantage, when it was still Southern Capital Group, to the big wins and quiet sacrifices. I joined Vantage Financial 9 years ago, when the company was still a small name in Charlotte, North Carolina's financial industry. Richard Langston, newly appointed CEO, personally recruited me from a competitor. I was working at a small firm, consistently hitting targets but overlooked for promotions. Richard sat across from me in a downtown Charlotte cafe, his gaze sharp but sincere. "Nathan, I need someone who knows this market," he said. "Someone clients trust." I nodded, sensing the opportunity to prove myself. And for the first 7 years, Richard was right to place his faith in me. I started with local clients, small businesses in Charlotte and nearby cities. I had no support team, no big budget, just persistence and late-night calls. I remember nights in hotel rooms, preparing proposals for contracts worth just tens of thousands of dollars. But step by step, I expanded the client portfolio, from regional companies to national corporations. I brought in Marshall Industries after they left our biggest competitor. I won Sullivan Properties when no one thought Vantage had a chance. Ramsey Enterprises, a tough client, signed a long-term contract after 3 months of relentless negotiation. Those contracts weren't just numbers. They were relationships built through dinners, golf rounds, and weekend calls. Under my leadership, Vantage Financial grew from a $5 million company to a $35 million enterprise. My client portfolio contributed about $14 million annually, accounting for 40% of the company's revenue. I extended contracts from 1 year to 3, even 5 years, ensuring stability for Vantage through a recession. Laura, my wife, often teased that I was married to clients. "Another dinner with the Sullivans?" she'd ask, her tone half joking, half bitter, as I packed for another business trip. Sophie and Liam grew up hearing the familiar refrain, "Dad's working." I missed Liam's basketball games, Sophie's piano recitals. I promised them it would all be worth it, that I was building a better future. And for a while, I believed it. 3 promotions, 2 office expansions, and 1 economic recession later, Vantage became a major name in Charlotte. I was proud seeing the company logo on high-rises, hearing clients praise our professionalism. But everything changed when Colin Hayes arrived. 3 months ago, during a quarterly meeting, he pointed to a chart and said, "Your new client acquisition rate has plateaued, Nathan." I explained that I was focused on expanding existing contracts. The Marshall Industries deal had just doubled, bringing in an extra $2 million a year. But Colin didn't care. "The future is new clients," he said, his voice cold. "We need hunters, not farmers." I didn't argue, but I knew he was targeting me. Colin's words echoed in my head as I stood in the kitchen. I opened the cabinet, took out a bottle of whiskey, and poured a small glass. The faint oak scent wafted up, but I didn't drink right away. I thought about the early days at Vantage, when Richard would stop by my office for advice, when we'd grab lunch and discuss strategy. Now Richard was consumed with board meetings, and Colin stood in between. I didn't blame Richard. He probably didn't know what Colin was doing, but I couldn't help wondering, did he even care? I looked out the window, moonlight illuminating the oak tree in the yard. I remembered Liam falling off his bike, crying but still getting back up. I remembered Sophie sitting under that tree, reading thick law books, dreaming of becoming a lawyer. I'd missed too many moments like those, because of calls with Evan, flights to Sullivan's headquarters, nights drafting contracts for Ramsey. But those relationships had built Vantage, and now, they were something Colin couldn't take away. I took a sip of whiskey, feeling the sharp warmth slide down my throat. I wasn't angry at Colin. I just saw clearer than ever that he'd underestimated the power of trust. I set the glass down, picked up the family photo from the shelf. Laura, Sophie, Liam. They deserved a better version of me, one who didn't just work but lived for them. I knew tomorrow would be a big day, not because I'd seek revenge, but because I'd do what I've always done best. Keep my promises, not just to clients but to my family. Colin had made a mistake, and I didn't need to do anything but let the market prove it. I stood in the kitchen, the whiskey glass still on the counter, soft yellow light from the chandelier casting a glow on the family photo. Laura, Sophie, Liam. They were the fire guiding me through 9 years at Vantage Financial, but also the ones I'd unwittingly left behind. Outside the window, the oak tree stood silent under the moonlight, a witness to the moments I'd missed. Liam's laughter learning to ride a bike, Sophie's voice reading books in the shade. My phone buzzed faintly, Evan Marshall's message about a contract renewal dinner still glowing on the screen. I hadn't replied. I knew Evan and the other clients had no idea I'd been fired, but Colin Hayes had made a big mistake, and I needed to stay sharp to seize the opportunity he'd unwittingly handed me. I sat down, took another sip of whiskey, feeling the sharp warmth slide down my throat. The oak scent reminded me of client dinners, toasting to close deals. But now, I wasn't thinking about past wins. I was thinking about the past few months, the final pieces of the plan Colin had built to push me out. He wasn't acting alone, maybe the board, or a bigger force like Apex Capital, the company rumored to be eyeing Vantage for a buyout. But whoever it was, they'd underestimated the strength of the relationships I'd built. Things became clearer since Colin arrived at Vantage 6 months ago. After cutting my commission by 20%, he began isolating me systematically. A month later, my assistant, Emily Larson, was reassigned to support a new group of hires. Colin brought in, "We need to optimize resources," he said, but I knew Emily was my eyes and ears in the office. Without her, I had to handle reports, schedules, and small details she'd always managed perfectly. I didn't complain. I kept calling Evan, Patrick Sullivan, David Ramsey, ensuring every contract was renewed on time, but I felt the shift. Then my business trip request started getting delayed. Requires additional approval, an HR email read, though I'd only needed to notify them before. My expense reports were returned with absurd questions. What was the purpose of the Sullivan Properties dinner? Or, why was a flight to Ramsey Enterprises headquarters necessary? Small things, but they piled up like tiny cuts, weakening my position. I heard rumors of new talent. Colin was interviewing young MBAs he called disruptors. I wasn't worried. I knew my value lay in the trust of my clients, not in flashy charts or presentation. But the moment that truly put me on guard was when Colin brought in Megan Foster, a 29-year-old from a tech startup, to my team. He didn't formally introduce her, just said, "Megan will learn from you, Nathan." Last week, she joined a call with Evan Marshall, my biggest client. Megan spoke too fast, using tech jargon Evan didn't care for. After the call, Evan texted me, "Who's the new girl? Is she replacing you?" I laughed, replied, "Just expanding the team." But driving home that night, I felt a shift inside. Not fear, but certainty, like reading an opponent's move in a card game. Megan wasn't there to learn. She was Colin's pawn, placed to overshadow me. I set the whiskey glass down, stood up, and grabbed my laptop from my bag. I opened my employment contract, flipping to the non-compete clause. I'd read it dozens of times, but now, I needed to be sure. The clause only applied if I quit,
Not if I was fired. I smiled. Colin probably hadn't thought of this. He was too busy with grand plans to realize I wasn't bound. I closed the laptop, opened my phone, and scrolled through my personal contacts. Over 200 names. CEOs, directors, partners, who signed with Vantage because they trusted me, not the company logo or its fancy Charlotte office. I thought about Laura in Raleigh, about Sophie and Liam, who deserved a better husband and father. I'd sacrificed too much family time building Vantage, but now I saw clearly the relationships I'd built were my true assets. Evan, Patrick, David. They weren't just clients. They were people I'd stood by through crises, dinners, handshakes. Colin didn't understand that, and that was his biggest mistake. I stood up, put the whiskey back in the cabinet. I wouldn't call anyone tonight, wouldn't send angry emails, or act rashly. I'd sleep, wake up clear-headed, and tomorrow morning, I'd make exactly 3 calls. Not to persuade, not to retaliate, just to inform them I was no longer with Vantage. The rest, I trusted, would unfold on its own. I looked at the family photo one last time, set it neatly on the shelf. I'd promised them a better future, and now I'd keep that promise, not just for them, but for myself. I turned off the light, headed to the bedroom. The house was quiet, but I didn't feel alone. I knew tomorrow would mark the start of a new chapter, and Colin, without realizing it, had just given me the chance to write it my way. I woke up the next morning, early sunlight, slipping through the bedroom curtains, casting a glow on the hardwood floor of our Charlotte suburban home. The house was still quiet. Laura was still in Raleigh. Sophie and Liam busy with their own lives. I didn't set an alarm. For the first time in years, I didn't have to rush for an early flight or a pre-dawn report meeting. But I didn't linger in bed. I got up, brewed a cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table. Last night's whiskey glass was put away, the family photo still neatly on the shelf. I knew today would be significant, not because I wanted revenge, but because I'd let the market speak for my worth. I opened my phone, scrolled through my personal contacts. Over 200 names, CEOs, directors, partners, who signed with Vantage Financial, because they trusted me. I wasn't going to call them all, just 3 calls, enough to set things in motion. I took a deep breath, sipped my coffee, and started. The first call was to Evan Marshall, my biggest client, behind a $1.8 million annual contract with Marshall Industries. The phone rang twice before he answered. Nathan, good morning. His voice cheerful, as always. I'm calling with some news, I said, keeping my tone steady. As of yesterday, I'm no longer with Vantage. Silence for a moment. What? What happened? Evan asked, his voice shocked. Who's handling our account now? I replied, probably Colin Hayes, or Megan Foster, the one from last week's call.
That's all I know. The decision's yours. Evan didn't say much, just promised to call back. I hung up, feeling a certainty spread through me. The second call was to Patrick Sullivan of Sullivan Properties, a $1 million contract. Patrick heard the news, his voice lowering. They're crazy, Nathan. Megan? She doesn't know this industry. I repeated, the decision's yours, Patrick. The third call with David Ramsey of Ramsey Enterprises went similarly. David asked, Colin's the flashy suit guy, right? He doesn't know a thing about us. I didn't elaborate, just said. I just wanted you to hear it from me first. 3 calls, no persuading, no rallying, just informing. I set the phone down, took another sip of coffee, and waited. It didn't take long for the phone to start buzzing nonstop. News spreads fast in Charlotte's financial industry, where people know each other through handshakes and contracts. By noon, 5 other clients called me, from Brighton Holdings to a small company I'd helped through a crisis 3 years ago. They all asked the same question. Who's handling our account now? I gave the same answer. Probably Colin or Megan. I'm no longer with Vantage. I didn't need to say more. They got it. By 2 p.m. Evan texted, just sent Vantage a termination notice for change in relationship management. Sullivan and Ramsey did too. I didn't reply right away, but I knew what was happening. 8 clients, totaling $3.2 million in contracts, had left Vantage in just a few hours. The phone buzzed again. Richard Langston, Vantage's CEO, left a voicemail. Nathan, this is Richard. We need to talk about your transition. Some clients are concerned. Call me back now. I listened but didn't call back. I had nothing to say to Richard. He'd let Colin act, and now he had to face the consequences. An email from Vantage's legal team arrived shortly after, reminding me of confidentiality obligations. I smiled. They were panicking. Colin texted too, his tone a far cry from yesterday's confidence. Nathan, let's discuss a severance package. There could be room for consulting work. I didn't respond. Too late. I knew I needed to prepare. I called Henry Walsh, a labor attorney. I'd once helped get a loan for his son-in-law's restaurant. We met at a small cafe in downtown Charlotte, where the smell of toasted bread mixed with the sound of grinding coffee. Henry reviewed my termination papers, nodded. They can't stop you from working, he said. The non-compete clause doesn't apply when you're fired, but they'll try to intimidate your clients. Be ready. I thanked Henry, paid for the coffee, and drove home. I wasn't worried. I'd built trust with Evan, Patrick, David over 9 years, not through threats or discounts. Back home, I got a text from Emily Larson, my former assistant. It's chaos here, Nathan, she wrote. Colin's trying to pin this on you for inciting clients. Richard's asking why no one saw this coming. I smiled. Emily had always been loyal, even after being reassigned. I texted back, thanks Emily. Stay safe. I set the phone down, looked out at the oak tree in the yard. Moonlight lit it up again, like last night. I thought of Laura, Sophie, Liam. I'd promised them a better future, and now I was delivering, not by seeking revenge, but by letting what I'd built speak for itself. I picked up the family photo from the shelf, wiped off a bit of dust. I didn't need to do anything more today. 3 calls had been enough to start a wave, and I knew it wouldn't stop. Colin and Richard would soon realize they hadn't just lost an employee, but the foundation of Vantage's growth. I placed the photo back, turned off the light, and headed upstairs. Tomorrow I'd keep going, with the clarity and confidence that got me here. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating the family photo on the shelf. Nathan Carter sat with my coffee, feeling a rare calm after yesterday's storm. 3 calls had shaken Vantage Financial, with $3.2 million in contracts canceled in just hours. Emily Larson's text about the chaos at Vantage still glowed on my phone, but I didn't reply. I knew this was only the beginning. Colin Hayes and Richard Langston would soon see they'd underestimated me, not because I sought revenge, but because client trust can't be bought with a logo or a fancy office. Today I needed to move forward, not to look back, but to build a new future. The phone buzzed at 9 a.m. Stephen Hargrove, president of Hargrove Associates, a smaller but respected financial firm in Charlotte, called me. I'd met Stephen at industry conferences, and he was always impressed with how I handled clients. Nathan, I heard about Vantage, he said, his voice direct. They were fools to let you go. Join Hargrove, vice president, 6-figure signing bonus, and full control over your accounts. I didn't hesitate. I'm in, I replied. Stephen laughed. Great. Start tomorrow? I nodded, though he couldn't see. This wasn't a rash decision. This was where I belonged. A company that valued trust, not charts or cliches. Hargrove Associates was in a modest building, a few blocks from downtown Charlotte. The office was small, but the atmosphere warm, with friendly handshakes and laughter from the break room. On my first day, Stephen personally introduced me to the team. Nathan's the biggest asset we've just gained, he said, and I felt the respect Vantage had forgotten. I got to work immediately, reaching out to my old clients. I didn't need to pitch. They'd heard about me, and within 3 weeks, 11 clients, including Evan Marshall, Patrick Sullivan, and David Ramsey, signed with Hargrove. A total of $5 million in revenue shifted from Vantage to Hargrove. Vantage's stock dropped 12% in that time, and I knew Richard was holding emergency board meetings. But what really caught my attention was a text from Emily Larson, sent from her personal number on Wednesday evening. Nathan, you need to know this, she wrote. It's not just Colin wanting his people in. They were planning to sell Vantage to Apex Capital. I sat down in the living room, reading the message again. Emily explained, 2 months ago, Apex Capital made an offer to buy Vantage, but only if they could integrate major accounts into their portfolio. They wanted to replace me with their own people, turning client relationships into company assets. Colin wasn't hired to boost sales. He was brought in to transfer my accounts, making them independent of one person, me. The truth was like a final puzzle piece, explaining everything: the corner desk, Megan Foster, the computer checks. I wasn't fired for underperforming. I was removed for being too successful. I texted Emily back. Thanks, Em. Be careful. I knew she was risking a lot, sharing this. I stood up, looked out at the oak tree in the yard. moonlight glowing as it had before. I wasn't angry. I just saw clearer than ever that Vantage had betrayed not only me, but the clients who trusted them. Evan, Patrick, David. They didn't leave Vantage because I asked. They left because they knew I was the only one who truly understood their needs. Apex Capital might have money, but they didn't have the trust I'd built over 9 years. That night, Laura returned from Raleigh. I heard the wheels of her suitcase on the driveway, and when she walked in, I hugged her tightly. "You okay?" she asked, her eyes worried. I nodded, told her about Hargrove, about the clients who followed me. Laura smiled, but her voice was serious. "You gave too much to Vantage, Nathan. Don't let Hargrove take what's left. I promised to do things differently. We had a simple family dinner, just the two of us. But I felt a warmth I hadn't in years." I told Laura about Liam, about his upcoming basketball game. "I'll be there," I said. And this time, I knew I'd keep my word. I looked at the family photo on the shelf. Laura, Sophie, Liam. They were why I fought. Not to prove anything to Colin or Richard, but to keep my promise of a better future. Hargrove wasn't just a new job. It was a chance to do things right, to balance work and family. I knew Vantage was crumbling, not because I sabotaged them, but because they'd forgotten the most important thing: trust. Emily texted again. "They just canceled the Apex meeting. Your clients tanked the deal." I didn't reply, but I smiled. The market had spoken, and I didn't need to do anything but keep being me. I stood up, put the dishes in the sink, and headed upstairs. Moonlight still shone through the window, but this time I felt relieved. Colin and Richard might try to salvage things, but they couldn't change the truth. They'd lost me, and with me, Vantage's foundation. Tomorrow, I'd keep building at Hargrove, not with anger, but with clarity and a new purpose. I stood in front of the bedroom mirror, adjusting my tie, morning light streaming through the window, brightening our Charlotte suburban home. 3 weeks had passed since I joined Hargrove Associates, and today was special. I'd be speaking at the Southeast Financial Summit, the region's biggest financial conference. I wasn't nervous. I'd prepared thoroughly, not to boast, but to prove a truth. Vantage Financial had forgotten, in this industry, trust between people is the real asset. I looked at the family photo on the dresser, Laura, Sophie, Liam, and smiled. I was doing this for them, and for myself. Laura walked in, set a coffee mug on the dresser. "You look sharp," she said, her eyes warm, but tinged with concern. "Don't let Vantage distract you." I nodded, gave her a hug before heading out. "I'll do it right," I promised. Driving through Charlotte's bustling streets, I thought about the journey so far. 3 calls had cost Vantage $3.2 million in contracts, and joining Hargrove brought 11 clients with $5 million in revenue. Emily Larson's text about Vantage's plan to sell to Apex Capital still lingered in my mind. Today at the summit, I knew Richard Langston and the board would be there. I wasn't planning a direct confrontation, but I'd let the truth speak. The Southeast Financial Summit was held at a grand hotel in downtown Charlotte, with a vast auditorium, bright stage lights, and hundreds of attendees from CEOs to young analysts. I sat on the speakers panel, next to others discussing market trends and technology. But my topic was building client loyalty in a transactional market. I'd worked with 2 Hargrove analysts for a month, gathering data on the accounts I brought in. The results were clear. Hargrove cut service response time by 53%, implementation costs by 30%, implementation costs by 30%, and client satisfaction rose 22%. These numbers weren't just about me. They showed what happens when a company prioritizes relationships over transactions. When my turn came, I stepped to the podium, lights hitting my face, but I didn't see the audience. I saw the faces of Evan Marshall, Patrick Sullivan, David Ramsey, people who'd trusted me for 9 years. I spoke slowly, voice steady, in an era where everything is automated and digitized. Personal accountability has become the rarest commodity. Companies often mistake client relationships for their assets. They're not. They're agreements of trust between individuals, needing constant reinforcement. I presented Hargrove's data, calling them a case study of clients switching firms and getting better service. I didn't name Vantage, but everyone in the room understood. I glanced at the audience, catching a glimpse of Richard Langston near the coffee station, next to Margaret Pierce, a board member. Richard's face was tense, his eyes avoiding mine, Margaret whispered something to him, but I didn't care. I continued. The lesson isn't in retention packages or contract obligations. It's in understanding that when you treat relationship managers as replaceable, clients will show you how wrong you are. The room fell silent. A few heads nodded. I wrapped up my talk, returned to my seat, feeling like I'd placed a perfect punctuation mark. During the kunda, a young analyst raised his hand. Your departure from Vantage and taking major clients, like in Hargrove's case, is that what firms fear when giving too much autonomy to relationship managers? The room went quiet. I felt Richard's stare from afar, like it could burn through me. I smiled, answered, "That's a good question. But look at it another way. Vantage didn't lose those clients because I took them. They lost them because they didn't understand what clients really need. No one followed me just because of personal loyalty. They followed because the way I served them better met their needs. In a way my former company deemed no longer aligned with their direction." I paused, glancing briefly at Richard. Every company has the right to change course, and every client has the right to decide if that course serves their interests. The market is very fair about this. After my talk, 3 former Vantage clients approached me, expressing their intent to switch to Hargrove. By the end of the summit, Hargrove signed 5 new contracts, worth $2.7 million in annual revenue. As I left the auditorium, I heard Vantage had just announced a restructuring. Colin Hayes was pursuing other opportunities. The deal with Apex Capital had officially collapsed. I didn't feel triumphant, just a certainty that the market had done its job. On the way home, I stopped at a park near our house, where Liam used to practice riding his bike. I looked at the familiar oak tree, thinking of Laura, Sophie, Liam. I'd promised to do things differently, and today, I felt I was keeping that promise. I took out my phone, texted Laura, "Summit's done. I'll be home early." She replied, "Good." Liam asked if you're coming to his game. I smiled, texted back, "Absolutely." I drove home, the sunset casting a glow over Charlotte. Vantage might be crumbling, but I was building something new. Not just revenue, but a life worth living. I stood in my new office at Hargrove Associates, looking out at Charlotte's skyline through a large window. Afternoon sunlight hit my desk, where the family photo, Laura, Sophie, Liam, sat neatly beside a framed note, with a simple phrase, "Success is the best revenge." I'd turned that frame face down long ago. Today, a year after Colin Hayes slid termination papers across a meeting table, I signed the final documents to become a partner at Hargrove. My client portfolio now brought in $20 million in annual revenue, driving Hargrove's 34% growth. But for me, this victory wasn't just about numbers. It was proof of what I'd always believed. Trust between people is the true asset. A year ago, I left Vantage Financial with a cardboard box holding 9 years of dedication. 3 calls cost Vantage $3.2 million in contracts, and when I joined Hargrove, 11 major clients, from Evan Marshall to Patrick Sullivan, followed, bringing $5 million in revenue. The Southeast Financial Summit was where I proved my worth to the industry, not with accusations, but with data and truth. Vantage collapsed afterward. They moved their office to Charlotte's suburbs, their once bright logo on downtown buildings now just a memory. Richard Langston resigned, and the Apex Capital deal fell apart. I didn't feel smug, just certain that the market had done its job. This morning I got an email from Megan Foster, the young woman Colin brought in to learn from me. "I was laid off with most of the sales team," she wrote. "Is Hargrove hiring?" I read the email, recalling Megan's awkward glance during that call with Evan. She wasn't to blame. She was just a pawn in Colin's plan. I forwarded the email to HR, noting worth interviewing. Not her fault. I held no grudge. Megan was young, with time to learn and grow, and I wanted Hargrove to be a place that valued that. My phone buzzed. A text from Evan Marshall. "Congrats on the partnership, Nathan. I knew you'd always stand tall." I replied, "Thanks, Evan. Also thanks to clients like you." He texted back, "No, it's because you're you. We just followed the value." I smiled, set the phone down. Evan wasn't just a client. He was someone I'd stood by through crises, dinners, handshakes. His trust, Patrick's, David Ramsey's, helped me rebuild at Hargrove. Not just a career, but a legacy. That afternoon, an envelope arrived at the office. Inside was a handwritten letter from Richard Langston. "Nathan, you were right," he wrote. "I prioritized deals over relationships, and it cost the company everything. If you're willing, I'd like to buy you a coffee to apologize in person." I read the letter, folded it, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. I wasn't angry at Richard. He'd once believed in me, but pressure from the board, from Apex Capital, led him astray. I texted back, "Coffee sounds good. I'll set it up." Not to gloat, not to dig up the past, but because sometimes the final step forward is letting go of what's behind. I drove home, passing Vantage's old building. The sign was gone, leaving an empty steel frame. Local news reported they were renting a small office in the suburbs, trying to restructure. I didn't slow down, didn't take a picture. I just kept driving, eyes forward, toward the life I was building. At home, Laura was preparing dinner. "Liam called from the court," she said. "He reminded you not to miss his game tonight." I laughed. "I'll be there." I'd kept my promise to Liam, attending every basketball game for the past 3 months. Sophie was coming home this weekend, and I'd planned a dinner to hear about her law school. I didn't want to miss another moment. I stepped into the yard, looking at the familiar oak tree. The sunset bathed it, making everything seem brighter. I thought about the past year, from Vantage's corner desk, through nights of reflection with whiskey, to Hargrove's partner office. I didn't win because I was smarter than Colin, or stronger than Richard. I won because I never lost trust, from clients, family, myself. Hargrove gave me a chance not just to work, but to do it right. I approved hiring 3 new staff with a profit-sharing policy, ensuring no one was treated like I had been. I went back inside, picked up the family photo from the shelf. Laura, Sophie, Liam, they were the center of everything. I didn't need that revenge frame anymore. My success wasn't about proving Vantage wrong, but living a life worth living. That night, I went to the court, sat in the stands, cheering for Liam. When he scored, looked up, and waved at me, I knew I'd done it right. I drove home, moonlight on the oak tree, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. Not because I'd won, but because I'd found my path. The story of Nathan Carter and my boss fired me for underperforming despite bringing 40% of revenue. Next day would be fun. Reflects the harsh yet inspiring realities of today's U.S. workplace, where loyalty to a company often goes unrewarded, and personal value can be overshadowed by short-term profits. Nathan, a 46-year-old sales director in Charlotte, was unfairly fired, despite generating 40% of Vantage Financial's revenue. All because the company wanted to restructure for a sale to Apex Capital. This betrayal, from moving his desk to a dim corner to bringing in Megan Foster to overshadow him, mirrors U.S. corporate culture, where veteran employees are often replaced by younger, cheaper alternatives to polish financial reports. Yet Nathan didn't retaliate. He leveraged his personal contact list of over 200 connections and the trust of clients like Evan Marshall to rebuild his career at Hargrove Associates, achieving a $20 million portfolio in just a year. His journey, from 3 disruptive calls to his speech at the Southeast Financial Summit, shows the power of personal relationships and resilience. The lesson is, in America's competitive job market, invest in your network and personal value, not reliance on one company. Like Nathan, stay calm in the face of injustice. Use the skills and trust you've built, and always prioritize family, like how he attended Liam's basketball games. True success isn't revenge, but living fully by what you believe, no matter how the market shifts. Please subscribe to the channel to follow the journeys of building trust and success like Nathan Carter's. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video with more inspiring stories.